but we bared the weather, and I think that the fire department looked extremely well, and they awarded a few, service awards for members that were there for so many years. And I think Bob couldn't make it. He was too busy sunbathing in Florida, but I think Bob received an award for, I think, 30, was it 30 years? 40 years?
40, yeah.
40 years of service to the fire department, and we were so proud. So we just want to thank you, Bob. Also, May 22nd, we're going to have what we call our drunk driving car reenactment. It's going to be on Walnut, and if you have never seen this, it's unbelievable. It's almost like a real life accident that we put on, the Princeton Alcohol and Drug Alliance, the PADA, along with Corner House, and it involves all the police, first aid, fire department, I mean everyone, and it's just excellent. The kids are the actors and actresses, and they do a great job, and it tries to drill home how safe they should be, especially around prom night. On May 29th, we'll have the Corner House Leadership Award ceremony, and we'll hand out the Marie Matthews Award, and that's held in this room for all the kids for the outstanding service that they've done. So those are my things. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz.
Do you want to mention Not in Our Town?
Oh,
We a little bit. Go ahead.
We also, Councilwoman Butler and myself, and the mayor and the mayor Lambert, and who else was there? Was anybody else there? Who else was there? Oh, okay. We attended Not in Our Town, where award ceremonies where they hand out awards for kids for their civic duties and so forth, and how they've held themselves up in school, the high school and middle school. And I go every year. I've been going for 12 years, I believe. I think it's 12 years. And this year, my daughter, and I had nothing to do with it, my daughter received one of the awards for Not in Our Town for her leadership and peer group experience over at John Witherspoon School. So it was a great event, and it's an event that I try to make every year. So we're proud of our kids in Princeton.
Two things. One is the pool is on tap to open on May 24th, Saturday, Labor Day weekend, right? Is that the 24th? Right. Yay. And secondly, I would say that Councilwoman Howard and I met with Kathy Monzo and with our attorney, and we are continuing to review the format of the billing, and I think we're making progress and moving along. Thanks.
No report.
Okay. I have a bunch of reports, so bear with me. I was invited to the White House for New Jersey Day, so I took the train down to D.C. on Thursday and had the opportunity to meet with administration officials, including the Secretary of Labor, Tom Perez, Cory Booker was there, other elected officials, leaders from faith organizations and nonprofits, and the administration outlined some of their major initiatives, including raising the minimum wage, immigration reform, and making college more affordable. So it was great that Princeton was able to be represented there. I'm going to be hosting an event this Wednesday at 12:30 in Heinz Plaza. Although if it's raining, we'll be inside in the community room with other mayors around the state for ban the box legislation. And that's going to be in cooperation with the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. So that, again, Wednesday at 12:30. On Thursday, we're going to be opening the farmers market for the weekly, seasonal farmers market out in Heinz Plaza. So that's always a great sign that spring is really here. Last weekend, I felt very fit. I did two athletic events for the Mayor's Wellness Campaign. The first one was a walk with Gail Olivia Everett, who's just an amazing person. She makes exercising fun, and she's going to be leading community walks every Tuesday and Thursday evening at 6 p.m. starting at the CP tennis courts. And Dolores was there for the Saturday walk, and I can report that she walks a lot faster than I do. If people are free, it's a nice way to get out and meet some folks and get a little exercise in. And then later that day was the Ciclavia, the first Ciclavia for Princeton. We closed Quaker Road. I want to thank the engineering department, Public Works Department for filling in the potholes, and the police department for helping keep everybody safe. It was a really nice event. Miss Butler was there. We rode past each other without crashing, so that was good. And the feedback we got was everybody wanted to do it every Sunday, which I don't know if is possible because the Historic Society has weddings at the Updike Farm, but they were a great partner, and it was a very nice event. I don't think anybody's mentioned yet, May 24th, before the pool, come to the parade. And then finally, the last report is that our next council meeting is going to be, instead of on a Monday night, on a Tuesday night. It's going to be on May 27th, because that Monday is Memorial Day. Yes, Ms.
Can I
Butler?
ask you a question? On the Ban the Box group, has anyone reached out to the university? I seem to recall that they've had an active group last year. I haven't heard so much this year, but...
Yeah, they do. We're working with them, too.
Great.
But thank you. Mr. Kaiser, any reports?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a few quick items to report on. Mercer Road, the potholes and the patching was done over the road this past week. The overlayment will be scheduled for June for the section of Mercer Road between Quaker and the Lawrence Township line. On Park Place, the water company started this week. They're going to be replacing the entire water distribution system on Park Place, and it will take about 4 weeks to complete. Also, Great Road West was repaved this past week, and that work is completed.
Good, thank you. Are there any other staff reports? Nope. Okay. If it's okay with the rest of the council, I wanted to move up a couple of the resolutions because I know there's been some people who've been patiently waiting. So the first will be, it's actually on the consent agenda, and I'd like to move it off of the consent agenda and to consider it now, and that's item E, which is 14-147, appointments for boards and commissions. One of the appointments is Anton Lanston, who's been a fixture of the Traffic and Transportation Committee for as long as I can remember, wants to have some fun in Maine, and so is leaving us, and I'm recommending Bob Altman be the next chair, and I think there might be some questions from him, and so I'd just like to invite him up. I don't know.
Well, I will move the nomination.
Okay.
And I'll second.
Okay, so it's moved by Ms. Krummeller and seconded by Ms. Butler. And this is for all three positions,
Yeah, fine.
right? Okay.
And I wanted to thank Anton for one thing. I mean, how long have you done this? Do you know? But, I mean, you've been a tremendous leader and the Traffic and Transportation Committee is extremely important in our community. I mean, everyone cares about traffic. So I want to thank you for all of your work and diligence. I also wanted to, I think it's such an important appointment. I thought it would be nice to have Mr. Altman talk a little bit about it, mainly about your vision of walkability and bikeability for our town. I mean, we all talk about this. We don't ever really focus on it as a council, but I think it's a really important issue, especially for the Traffic and Transportation Committee. And I just wanted to hear a little bit about what your thoughts are on it. Thanks.
It's been a long time since I've used a microphone, so you'll have to forgive me. Thank you for moving the motion, Councilwoman Krummeller. Let me start by also complimenting Anton because it fits into what I would say about pedestrians and bicycles and traffic and transportation in Princeton. I had been on the Township Traffic Safety Committee for more than a decade, and was honored to be asked to join the Traffic and Transportation Committee in Princeton when it was created. We were reminiscing tonight at the first meeting. There were some people who had lived in the township, there were some people who had lived in the borough, and people were reluctant to use the word township or borough because we had become consolidated. And Anton, through his leadership, basically put consolidation at the street level and let us work with traffic, with bicycles, with pedestrians, and with public transportation as a combined community, and that has been a huge benefit. Walking, pedestrians, bicycles. I'm a cyclist. I wish I could walk better. They are, both to me personally and through the policies that we've set in our community, two of the major priorities on which we should be working in the coming years. Traffic and transportation has, for the last 18 months, and increasingly in the past 5 or 6 months, paid more and more attention to cycling and to pedestrians. We were very fortunate that Sam Bunting agreed to come onto the committee as a full member, and he has brought another perspective that helps us look at what we're doing. We had a meeting tonight, and to the extent that you're interested, I could go over our agenda, because our agenda is a mixture of vehicles, pedestrians, cycling, the variety of things that we have on the table that we are doing, and the variety of things that we know need to be done. It's surprising and good. We've recently, with Bob Kaiser's help, been able to make contact with a key person in the Department of Transportation. And that means that 3 of the major projects that we've been interested in, a couple of which deal directly with pedestrian safety in the Central Business District, have now been moved off the dime, where they've been for the last 2 or 3 years. And we hope, we've been told we can expect to have an all-cross signal at Nassau and Van Deventer and Washington by the end of the summer. Please don't hold your breath, but that's much better response than we've been able to get.
Why does it take so long? Isn't it just
Because it's
timing
the state of New
lights?
Jersey.
The Department of Transportation, in my experience, has never been a rapid response unit, and now they're even more understaffed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
That's
you,
great.
Anton, too.
Thank you.
Appreciate all your service.
Thank you, Anton.
And Bob, I should let you know that one of the things we talked about, I'm trying to remember who came to our last meeting, but to have the chairs of the different boards and commissions come to council at the end of the year and talk about what their goals are for the upcoming year. So it's something to think about, and I'll be reaching out to all of the chairs, but to have that on the agenda for November or December, so you can come to council and have that conversation, because it's certainly something that, it's helpful for us, especially those of us who aren't liaison to whatever committee it is, to hear what's going on. So, thank you. So the motion has been moved by Ms. Kremler, seconded by Ms. Butler. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the resolution passes unanimously. And which one is that? Oh, for those are all just the consent agenda. I think that's okay.
Mayor, can I move, there are 4 resolutions on the consent agenda relating to contracts the health department has, and our health officer
Okay.
being...
Well, should we just move the consent agenda?
I'm happy to move the consent agenda.
Okay.
Second.
I think I'm supposed to read through the whole
Oh,
thing.
so go ahead.
So, yeah, okay, so, but anyway, it's been, item A, bills and claims, B, Resolution 14-144, banner request for Princeton Chamber of Commerce announcing the Midsummer Marketing Showcase to be hung over Washington Road, July 7th through July 14th, 2014. Item C, 14-145, banner request for the Stony Brook Millstone Watershed Association announcing the Butterfly Festival to be hung over Washington Road, August 4th through 11th, 2014. Item D, 14-146, Special Olympics USA, 8 pole banners on Nassau Street from June 7th, 2014 to June 23rd, 2014 to promote the Special Olympics 2014 USA Games that will be held in Mercer County. Item F, 14-148, appointing Tricia Cecil Esquire, Conflict of Interest Attorney. Item G, 14-149, resolution of support and engagement, Central Jersey Transportation Forum. Item H, 14-150, Child Health Conference Clinic, Pediatric Services with Princeton Medical Center, not to exceed $5,760. Item I, 14-151, High Tops STD Clinic, not to exceed $5,000. Item J, 14-152, High Tops STD Education, not to exceed $4,000. Item K, 14-153, Health Education Suzanne Rose, not to exceed $7,000. Item L, 14-154, Public Health Nurse Catherine Corwin, not to exceed $6,000. Item M, 14-155, Healthy Child Well Baby Clinic, not to exceed $4,380. Item N, 14-156, Fireworks Display and Authorization, Prince University Reunions, May 31st, 2014. Item O, 14-157, Fire Department Application for Membership, Casey J. Martinez. Item P, 14-158, Fire Department Application for Membership, Joseph N. Mudry. Item Q, 14-159, Fire Department Application for Membership, Samuel L. Keller. Item R, 14-160, Fire Department Application for Membership, Samuel W. Pritt. And item S, 14-161, Fire Department Application for Membership, Austin W. Brock. Moved by Mr. Miller, seconded by Ms. Howard.
I have one question. I'm looking through the inventory of items we received in our packet, and I'm not actually finding -148. Am I the only one who did not receive that?
No, I received.
I think it came under separate, it came under a separate
receive it.
email. But you might be able to find it online.
Yeah, and Patrick, just in terms of background, we noticed, Joe and I noticed in our review of the legal bills that Ed was, you got, okay. But just for the public, that we noticed that we still had, that Edgemere was still acting as our conflict attorney, and so we raised the, since Trishka's our new attorney, we asked to prepare this, for this to be prepared.
Consent agenda? Okay. So it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, consent agenda.
Quick comment and a question on on a couple of items. 14-150 talks about Princeton Medical Center. I think it's now UMCPP or something like that. Yeah. Secondly, 14-156, we have a request for a fireworks display and authorization, but we also annually receive requests from the university for music permits. I'm wondering, are they forthcoming?
Okay, well, that may be just a difference in how we administer those. In a former life, we did them administratively. They didn't come before the governing body, so maybe Dolores can help me since they do so much of that in the office. But the ones for reunions and that type of thing have all been processed.
Okay, well, one thing to be wary of, because we changed it every year on Township Committee, because they'd always ask for a later time than the noise, and so it was like an annual thing, they'd ask to have it until 2 a.m., and we'd always say till 11 p.m. So hopefully the permission was only given till 11 p.m. Okay.
Township still does their music amplification, and the borough does the noise permit, and we have received several noise permit for the reunions, and they have paid the $10. We charge $10.
And it's only until 11 p.m.?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question, too.
Yeah, Ms. Carla?
This is about the bills and claims. I remember that we used to have the resolution or ordinance number on the bills, didn't we? and I don't see them anymore.
I'm not sure, I mean, it's new software that we're using, so I don't know that we have the ability to do that, but we can check.
Okay. Okay. I think unless anybody has a request to move something forward, we'll go back and do the budget. Is that okay? Okay. So, Swag, come on up. So tonight we have, well, I mean, Bill, are you waiting for us to do the ordinance introduction?
Since he wrote such a terrific memo, and I have to say, I mean, I'm grading papers this week, and that would have been an A. And Bob, if people, I mean, I'm serious, that memo should stand as sort of the example of memos for us, I think, because it was really well written, and it was very clear and short, and
Yeah, it was excellent.
It really
And
was.
for that, you might get to go home early,
Yes.
so, sorry. Okay, so we'll go down to the ordinance introduction, and then we'll go back up to the budget and go back through. So, we have the ordinance introduction, ordinance concerning the issuance of a certificate of compliance for rental units and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974. And can you just walk us through what this is?
In the former borough's housing ordinance, there was an exemption granted for single-family homes where people rented out one room, which they're allowed to by zoning, or if they had a garage apartment, again authorized by zoning, everything else being equal. We did not inspect those properties. Two reasons. Number one, the tenant protections are not the same as if the owner did not live on the premises. So if you live on a premises where the owner lives there, your eviction requirements are much less. It's much easier to get someone out when you live on the property. And also, when you're the owner of a property, you have much more of a higher standard for the upkeep and maintenance of the property than someone who's an absentee landlord. So back in '94, when I wrote the ordinance along with the former rental housing board, those were the considerations, and we exempted them. We do survey the exempt properties as we refer to them every few years to make sure that they're still exempt. And we do inspect them initially when they come online. But we feel that there is no need. We don't have regular problems at these properties. We don't receive complaints from people who live at these properties. So we wanted to continue that exemption. And I outlined that in my memorandum from May of last year when we did the harmonization. When we were doing our staff training this year, and I was literally reading out of the book, it wasn't there. And you could see there was item E and item G, but no item F. And I'm red in the face because it was clearly my mistake. I transcribed the whole ordinance last year, so it was my mistake, and I apologize.
Okay. So is there a motion to?
So moved.
Second?
It's moved by Mr. Liverman, seconded by Ms. Krummeller. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
yes.
Ms. Cramiller?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Simon?
Yes.
Thank you. The ordinance
you.
is introduced. The public hearing for this will be on June 9th, 2014.
Great.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we can go to the budget. Thank you.
Sure. So let me just take us back a little bit. We introduced the budget on March 24th. On April 28th, we were going to have the public hearing, and we were planning to adopt, but we had to make a couple of changes. Some things that were recommended by the Department of Community Affairs. So we introduced the amendment on April 28th. The amendment needed to be advertised because it met a couple of the thresholds that are in the statute. And so we have since advertised that amendment, set the public hearing for tonight. And in terms of the budget, this budget has no reduction in services. There is no tax increase on the municipal tax rate. The surplus that we've used is the same as what we anticipated to use from 2013, and this budget is about 2.3% less than the 2013 budget. So,
Okay. And are there any questions from council at this point?
Thank you, Cindy, that was helpful to get that, to remind us. Can you just remind us also where we are in relation to the state's requirements for adoption of the budget?
yes, the budget was reviewed by the state again this year. They made a couple of recommendations that we amend it for. They've reviewed the amendment, and they gave us clearance to adopt this evening.
Ms. Crumler?
Can you explain why, if the budget is lower, there's no tax reduction?
The budget is lower because we've reduced the up-to-cap amount that is in the mayor and council's budget by about $950,000, and then we've also reduced the reserve for uncollected taxes about $450,000, so that accounts for about a $1.4 million reduction.
Right, but why don't the taxpayers see that? Or why don't the taxpayers see that? If the budget, do you see what I'm asking? If the budget is reduced, why is the tax rate not being reduced?
Because there were some fluctuations in some other revenue lines that we had to adjust for as well.
Can you explain the justification for making those reductions in the budget?
Some of them were based on some recommendations from CFAT, that they recommended that the bucket not be as high, that it goes in terms of the surplus policy that was adopted to kind of stabilize our surplus from year to year and not grow it instrumentally. So based on their recommendations, these were some other adjustments that we made. And these were made, I believe, prior to even the introduction of the budget.
Mr. Simon?
It might be helpful, those two line items that you described, are those appropriations or revenue?
They're appropriations.
So what is the offsetting revenue adjustment that corresponds to that?
There were adjustments in various revenues. It's not one specific, out of one individual revenue line.
I don't remember off the top of my head. One that was significant were the delinquent taxes that we collect. We had more budgeted last year that we anticipated than we could anticipate this year. And that's just because we're only allowed to anticipate up to a certain amount that's available. So that was quite a big difference. And I don't remember some of the other ones, but I do know that there were some variances. And most of them, I think, were in reserves for debt service. That was one of them. So because we had, I believe, $1.5 million in there last year from capital surplus, and this year was about $500,000 that we brought in from capital surplus. So there was a big reduction in that one as well.
Thank you, that explains it.
Are there any other questions or comments from council?
Are we talking about overall on the budget or simply on what Sandy's just presented?
Overall on the budget, and then
Oh,
we'll
yes.
open it up for the...
Oh, yes, we have lots to talk about on the budget.
Okay.
All right, so may I start?
Yep, go ahead.
All right. There's several different issues to talk about, varying size. Let me start with the one that's going to generate the most heat to try to just get it out of the way. And that's the one that we talked about at our last, our meeting 2 weeks ago, and that's the salary raises. Just to catch people up in terms of what's happened, we had a discussion about whether to include in the amended budget an increase of close to $20,000 for salary increases for mayor and council. Since that time, there was also an article, there were a number of articles. One in particular was in the packet that Mr. Kern authored. And that generated some email discussion among council and mayor. I actually asked our attorney whether that constituted an open public meeting, and her response was, it did not. She considered it borderline, but it did not rise to that level. And that was actually the reason for the delay at the start, as I was discussing with her. Why I'm having a little bit of trouble understanding that call, but I'm going to set that aside for the moment. There are several issues that were raised on both sides of that, and I'd like to speak to them briefly. The first is simply to note that every one of us up here on the governing body endorsed the findings of the Joint Consolidation and Shared Services Study Commission. And as members of that commission, Council President Miller and I helped author the commission's final report. One of the recommendations in that report concerns the governing body and reads in part, the commission recommends the elected positions in a consolidated municipality be compensated at the level currently paid in the borough for its mayor and governing body. That would result in recurring annual savings of approximately $61,000. That is the level that we ended up setting last year for our salaries. One of the themes that has come through in conversation has been that there's a sense of undervaluing Councilman Liverman's and Council President Miller's service, and I want to communicate unequivocally that I in no way undervalue the service and contributions of either of them in terms of the contributions they've made to our community over many years. And I would be very surprised if you could find a single person in the entire town who thinks that the pay cut in any way represents any sort of devaluation of their services. But coming back to the salary issue and it's the public discussion of it, as I mentioned, the Consolidation Commission included that recommendation in the report. That was voted on by both governing bodies. There was a public referendum on consolidation where the report played a major role in the discussion. There was extensive planning in the year prior to consolidation by the TTF, where many details down to very fine-grained level were worked through in public, yet no one chose to raise the issue of governing body salaries. And we pledged, every single member of this governing body pledged in our joint campaign as a group to realize the recommendations of the Commission and the TTF with respect to consolidation. In addition to that, Councilwoman Krumler and I were up for re-election last year, and both of us took the position that we were opposed to the salary raises, as did our Republican opponent. So the representation that all of us have made consistently to the public is that we support the recommendations of the Commission, and that includes our current salary level. I don't believe that anything that we have done would entitle us to undermine our own promises to our constituents. And that's what I feel would be the case if we were to pass these pay raises. One of the points that I made in my comments in the press was that these raises are disproportionate with respect to those that we have budgeted for the staff this year. As people will recall, the PBA agreement calls for a 1.75% raise, and excluding promotions, the raises for other staff and other departments will be approximately at that level. This contrasts with the proposed pay raise of 17% for the mayor, 66% for the council president, and 33% for other members of council. There was some question about whether anybody else in the entire municipality took a pay cut or not. I recall discussing that point last year, but frankly, I have not had the time in preparing for this meeting to dig back through all those notes and find anything with any precision. But I also view that as a bit of a digression. The issue with respect to the staff is in many ways more simple than that. If we as members of the governing body carve out an exception to the Commission's recommendations for our own benefit, how will we handle situations where which of course we can all anticipate, where members of the staff may deserve a promotion and a raise based on the level of service and based on past practice, but not based on the new realities of the consolidated Princeton, where fewer senior positions are available in many departments? There's no question that we will have statutory authority under state law to make decisions in favor of fiscal austerity and consistency with the Commission's recommendations. I would advise that we also act with an integrity of purpose in such situations, and were the mayor and council to grant ourselves a pay raise, it would undermine that integrity. It would be an unambiguous sign of entitlement on our own behalf and disrespect to the staff who serve our community. There are a few issues that have been raised which frankly I agree with. One has been raised by Councilman Liverman. I believe he raised it last year and again this year, that the proposed raises for municipal governing body members could potentially enable less well-off members of the community to run for office. Last week, Council President Miller also correctly pointed out that the current pay level should not be considered permanent. With regard to these concerns, I'll first note that in terms of making it less expensive for somebody else to run for office, the simplest thing any of us could do would be to not run and make room for them. The advantage of the incumbency being what it is, we are a significant contributor to their cost. But beyond that, while a governing body voting a pay raise for itself is always politically perilous in some degree, and presumably more so in years following the relevant commitments that we have each made to our following the relevant commitments that we each made to our constituents, we do have options to address these concerns in ways that do not involve undermining our own promises or giving ourselves a proportionate raise. We could, for example, pass a resolution enacting the proposed raises for those who succeed us in office, and I would be supportive for such a resolution. That would adequately address the question of providing these benefits for others who may be less well off in the community. I would also be willing to vote a pay raise for municipal body officials that is proportionate with the pay raise that we're offering to the staff this year, and that would be a 1.75% increase. I believe that would be entirely consistent with the Commission's recommendations, and as I said, it's proportionate with what we're offering the municipal staff. For me, the most important aspect of this debate is that we do not undermine our own promises to our constituents, and that we act in a manner that is respectful both to our constituents and to the municipal staff. I think both of these proposals would help achieve that goal. And I have one last observation on this topic, and it's really directed to staff in the spirit of gaining something positive about what has become a difficult and divisive situation. You've chosen, Ms. Webb and Ms. Monzo, to introduce the not yet enacted pay raises for mayor and council into the mayor and council lines of the budget, rather than lumping them with all of the other not yet enacted pay raises under salary and wage adjustments. Upon reflection, this does lead to a more transparent reading of the budget for the public. And so my request for next year, I think it would be absurd to make a request at this late date for this year, but for next year, my request is that you break out proposed salary and wage adjustments for each department, rather than leaving lumped as one lump sum in the budget. I have other comments on other sections of the budget, but I suspect that we should probably tackle this issue and then move on.
Okay. Mr. Lohman?
Yeah. Thank you, Councilman Simon. This has been somewhat of a sticking point for me, and I wrote. I'm just going to read what I wrote because I don't want to get. I'd like to just start by saying that I've always believed in saying you treat everyone the way you want to be treated, and this is why I never call or reference anyone in derogatory statements in the media or up here on the dais. I treat everyone the way I want to be treated. I've never put down, I've never belittled anyone up here. I've always shown respect for everyone as a human being, as also an elected official. And that being said, as Councilman Simon said, I was hurt on Friday while reading the Princeton packet, where I felt that I was attacked, as other members may have felt the same way. As many of you know, I'm one of the council members that have asked for the salary adjustment. And let me just remind the public and my colleagues that the mayor's request that I back off this issue and agree to revisit the council salary issue was last year. And I thought that we were going to revisit the issue. And I was personally blown away during our last meeting when Councilman Simon said, I just wanted to dismiss this revisiting that we agreed to last year. And let me also remind the public that we have spent hours and hours, days and days, harmonizing all the employee salaries and basically upward. My salary and Council President Miller's were the only salaries that were totally reduced, cut during consolidation. And let me say that I did not raise the issue, but last year, but I did not push the salary issue because I thought it was going to be discussed this year. It is funny, and no, it is sad, that we sit up here and constantly throw out political correct words to win resident support. We say things like it's nice to have a diverse town. We say things like we support affordable housing. And the truth is sometimes, as long as it's not near our homes. This salary discussion is a lot larger than just putting $19,000 into a line item. The truth is that many good and decent residents of Princeton may actually want to serve on council. The cost of serving is not within their means. Now, I've actually spoken to a parking attendant, a nursery school assistant teacher, and servers at a local restaurant, that if the salary or stipend was increased, they may consider in the future running for the office. We cannot sit here and because of some of us have been blessed financially, not see that by continuing to limit the stipend, we're creating a system where only a certain financial class of people can join us. I've stated to my council members that if I was to comment to any other towns in New Jersey that were considering consolidation, I would advise them never to cut the stipend or salary just to look good in the public eye. I would advise them to consider all ramifications of a massive salary reduction, to look at the effect of the cut and look at the effect of the cut would have on others. Look at what message is being sent to people of lesser means that may want to run for office. To look at how cutting a sitting public council person's salary, and even though I appreciate Councilman Simon's remarks today, but can be looked upon as disrespectful, degrading, and devalue of that person. We should not be in the business of holding people down, but placing them up. I do not think that Princeton residents are that petty that they want me or anyone else to have in this position, to not have this position because they cannot serve. I will end by the same kind of number that Councilman Simon has always puts out, which I love, that my salary that I take home for this job is a little over $500 a month. If you look at the minimum hours that I give to the community a week, let's say minimum around 20 hours a week, and let's divide that by 80 hours a month into $550. That's about $6.80 an hour. I don't know what the minimum wage is. I think someone said $7 or $8.
$8.25.
$8.25 an hour. I know you don't take this job for financial compensation. I'm aware of that. But you also need to realize with consolidation, the work is doubled. More time for the community issues will be needed. And I'm not asking, believe me, this is no handout. I will continue to serve to the best of my ability. But I'm asking for council members to please support the salary adjustment and let's move on. There are many other issues to deal with. We're talking $19,000 and, I just don't see why this has been a major issue. I really, really don't. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cormier?
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with a lot of what you're saying, Lance. The problem is that you didn't say it when we were making promises. And that's why I did say I myself cannot bring myself to vote for a pay increase because I sat in the Finance Committee meetings and where this was decided, and no one said anything at the time. No one made any of these passionate arguments, which are good arguments. But for me, it's a matter of promises, and I said into the packet, I personally would feel like a weasel. I cannot bring myself to vote for it because I think about what I promised. So I do understand your points, and I think they're good points, but they're overruled by the fact that we made a promise.
Ms. Howard?
So I'm glad we're having this discussion. I'm sorry we're doing it sort of at this late time in the evening. And I think there may be folks in the public from whom we want to make sure we hear at this point in the process as well, including the chairman of the Consolidation Commission who may have thoughts on this. But just addressing Jenny's most immediate point, we certainly did make a promise, but we didn't make a promise that binds into infinity. And we have not found ourselves bound by everything. Neither the Consolidation Commission nor the TTF recommended or even spent much time thinking about a public safety director, and we didn't dismiss suggestions about a public safety director out of hand. We had consistent debates and investigated the idea, even though it had not been proposed. So we have not found ourselves bound by these reports, and certainly now that we're several years out, I don't think it's fair to do that either. And I think this is really about two issues here. One is fairness. This is restoring a pay cut that two of our colleagues have faced, and I want to be supportive of them. They've faced a pay cut, and I don't want to in any way diminish their contributions. I think the second thing is really this is a statement of what we want our governing body to look like. When I ran for borough council, I did so in part because there was no one on council who had a young family. And I say that with a broad interpretation of young family, as I have gray hairs coming in. But the council was not representing the town, I thought, and that was showing up in debates on issues. And if we don't have a council that reflects the breadth of our society, it will impact all of our decision-making. And as Lance has noted, this clearly has an impact on who does run, and otherwise it will become a council of people who can afford to do this. So I will support what is proposed. Thank you.
But let's let everybody speak before second round. Unless you want to defer to Ms. Krummeller, and then...
I just had a quick amendment that I would also support an increase commensurate with the rest of the staff, and I would like to put that on the table.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak at this point, or should we...
I'd like to point out that when you start with a salary of $1 and increase it by $1, you're doubling the salary. When you start with a salary of $10 and increase it by $1, you're doubling it by 10%. And I think that the kind of comparison that was made by my colleague a few minutes ago about comparing the proposed salaries of the elected officials with the salaries of the staff is invalid, because the base from which you start is very different. And I'd like to move away from that discussion at this point and simply point out that tonight we're not talking about salaries of the elected officials or salaries of the employees of the municipality. We're talking about the municipal operating budget. We're talking about a $59 million budget. We're talking about an increase in one element of that budget from 2013 to 2014 of $19,000. That's not a tenth of the budget. It's not 1/100th of the budget. It's not 1,000th of the budget. If you take it in percent, it's probably not even a millionth of the budget. So why are we focusing on one particular element of the budget? We're focusing on it because there's been an attempt made to politicize the approval of the budget. And I think that that demeans the individuals who have moved in that direction and has resulted in the use of language which I think is entirely inappropriate. There have been statements made that if you don't agree with the pay scale, you shouldn't run for office. And I, for one, don't appreciate being told what my criteria should be for running for office. The pay scale is certainly not the criteria that I apply when I run for office. I don't like the word weaseling used when someone talks about the possibility of changing an item in the budget. So I would point out to you that the issue before us tonight is not the pay scale. The pay scale will be dealt with at an appropriate time, at an appropriate place, when a salary resolution is presented to the council. And at that point, we can have all the debate we care to have about the salary of the mayor and the council members. But what I really resent is what has taken place here as an attempt to cut off the possibility of any debate and any discussion on the issue of the pay scale by trying to control a line item in the budget in such a manner that when the issue comes before council, there is no possibility of having a discussion. If the money is not in the budget, you can't discuss it. And I would suggest to you that what has gone on is undemocratic and ill-advised and out of place. We are dealing with a budget. We're not dealing with the salary of any individuals. And if you are opposed to the budget, say so. But don't talk about salary of the mayor and council. It is inappropriate.
Thank you. Before we have, yeah, go ahead. I just want to clarify what our options are before, because we had about a half hour of discussion on this so far, and I know it's a topic that has a lot of emotion as well as feeling attached to it. But what we're voting on tonight is the resolution to adopt the whole budget. At the last meeting, we voted on whether to strip this part out, and that was voted down. And so our options tonight are to vote yes or no on the adoption of the budget. If there's a desire by some council members to take out this line item, can you just walk us through what that would even mean? I mean, should I be asking this? Is that a desire?
Yes, you should, because if we want to pass the budget this evening, then the only changes that are allowed are non-substantive. And so we would need a very specific ruling from our attorney over what constitutes non-substantive. If we make a substantive change to the budget, we have to have another public hearing. So for example, I would assert that moving that money from the mayor and council line item to the salary and wage line item, which doesn't change the total dollar amount in the budget, $1, is a non-substantive change.
It's more than 10%. I don't think we can do that, Patrick, and the reason is because then this amendment would then have to be advertised again.
Why is that?
Prolong. The three criteria are to add a new appropriation, which would be greater than 1%, which this would not be, increase or decrease a line item by more than 10%. So if we take that 19,000 and move it to another line, it's going to be more than 10% of the mayor and council salary budget, which would require another advertisement, another review by the state, and then postponement of an adoption into some point in June. And the third is to increase taxes by more than 5%. So there are the three thresholds which would require an advertisement of an amendment. And doing what you're suggesting would fall into one of those three categories.
Okay. Yep, Ms. Butler?
Could I go ahead? I'm the only person to not have commented, so even though it appears we can't make a change unless we're going to vote against the entire budget, I would like to say something, because tempers have gotten a little bit heated, and they're, to take a stand that someone disagrees with, it doesn't mean it's personal, and it doesn't mean it's political. it can be principled, which is what I think this is. We're not several years out from consolidation. This is the second year out from consolidation, and this has been a frustration. The salary harmonization, frankly, is one area that I don't think that we have done a particularly good job, and I would recommend to other communities that are looking at this that they do the process quite a bit differently, because we haven't, I don't think, found the savings that we might have hoped, in part because of the way we chose to harmonize. So these salaries were quite specific, whereas through the process of consolidation, harmonization of salaries came to mean increasing to the higher of 2 levels for people doing the same job. We were quite clear in the consolidation recommendation, the transition task force, that our salaries stay on the borough scale. I would second Patrick's suggestion, and I guess Jenny did too, that perhaps we would want to increase these salaries by the same rate we increase the rest of the staffs, and then we don't have to have this conversation every year. And frankly, Lance, I'm sorry, I didn't know. Last year, this just sort of disappeared. If you recall, I went through backflips to try to get this passed so that you would be able to have the discussion, and it just disappeared. I mean, it was not resolved, and if you were promised that we would talk about it this year, that's news to me, so I'm sorry about that. I've lost my train of thought about what I was going to say there. Anyway, I don't think it's political. I don't think it's personal. For me, it really is a principled stand. We promised to deliver on the promises of consolidation, and this was one salary recommendation that was quite specific, and we are 2 years out, and I think we have really tried very hard to adhere to most of the recommendations of the Consolidation Commission and the Transition Task Force. And if we have varied from those, they've been few and far between, and with good reason. I know what else I was going to say. I would entertain the suggestion, I think, that Patrick made, that, you know, if people feel strongly that this is an issue that keeps people from running, that might otherwise consider running, I would consider a raise for new people.
Ms. Carmelo?
Well, I just want to also respond that I think we can have heated discussions without taking it personally or calling it political. I mean, just because we disagree, just because we voted against this, you know, it's not political. I mean, or it's just as political as any other decision we make that is important to the public.
Ms. Howard?
I would be interested in hearing whether there's any public comment, so, you know, so that we can bracket this issue. It sounds like we're going to have another opportunity to debate this when the salary ordinance comes up, so, but I think we ought to at least see if the public has any comment.
Okay, and we'll split up this public hearing too in a bit unorthodox way, because will there be another public hearing, or I'll open up the public hearing again for larger budget issues, but if there's anybody who'd like to speak specifically to the salary line item, I welcome you up at this moment. Mr. Lanston.
Regarding the mayor's salary and the salary of council, this is a subject which has had a lot of discussion. Almost a year ago, I spoke out strongly in opposition to a budget adjustment for council salaries, for mayor's salaries at that time. Now I'm advocating for a budget adjustment that will allow for a reasonable and responsible salary dialogue at a later date. The baseline report of the Consolidation Commission delivered in January 2011 specifically listed borough salaries using 2010 as a baseline. Those salaries are in effect today, 4 years later. Last year at approximately this time, I wrote a letter to the editor on this matter, and in that letter, in 2013, it was July 2013, I said, the recommendation adopted by the Consolidation Study Commission was very clear. And I agree with Councilman Simon. We said, and I'll quote it again, the elected positions in a consolidated Princeton be compensated at the level currently paid in the borough for its mayor and governing body. I believed at that time the governing body should give itself at least a year, a full year, under consolidation, and then revisit the proposal in 2014. And I said that in the letter at that time. It was never the intent of the Consolidation Commission that the council's salaries be frozen at the 2010 level. Now, I believe the council has a serious responsibility to our community. That responsibility is to build an amount of money into the current budget to allow for a salary discussion that potential salary increases at a later date. Council has a great opportunity to be both responsible and exercise your leadership that has been voted to you. This is not a consolidation issue. This is not a consolidation issue anymore. The intent of consolidation has been met. This is an opportunity for council to provide responsible leadership for Princeton and put an adjustment in the current budget that will allow a responsible dialogue at a later date. That's my view as former chairman of the Consolidation Commission. It's also my view of having spent hundreds and hundreds of hours in debate, conversations, looking at salary issues, and I pass that along to you for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? Okay. I have a few comments on this as well. I just want to make 5 points. The first is I completely agree with, I think, the point made by Ms. Krummeller and Ms. Butler that we can disagree, and that doesn't mean that it's personal. However, you can disagree and also have it be personal, and I think this is something that I think we just have to be mindful of as we debate. So when your argument for something is that someone's a weasel if they disagree with you or if they lack integrity because they disagree with you, I think that's why some of your colleagues are feeling like it's personal. It's the language in which you're disagreeing that makes it feel personal. Second is tying the increases to increases in the staff salaries, which is something that we might want to consider. However, it's never been done that way, and it hasn't been done that way. These salaries actually weren't set in 2010. They were set, I believe, 14 years ago and haven't changed at all. They haven't been subject to the 1%, 2%, whatever it was the staff was getting. They've been fixed in time since before one of my children was born, who's now a teenager. So they're not tied to that, and so it's hard to say that we're going to treat them the same way now. I mean, that would be a policy shift, but we should recognize that they're old. It's hard to vote and we'll be taking this up later, but it's hard to vote yes for this, and I completely recognize that, and it's uncomfortable, and it feels like, we would all probably wish somebody else could be making that determination instead of us, but it's not the easy, it sounds like a weird thing to say, but it's not the easy thing for us to be voting on it, and I think that's one of the reasons why they've stayed fixed for that amount of time. And we did vote on this at the last meeting or the meeting before that. We voted, there was a motion to strip this. The majority voted to keep it in. And so I think we also have to realize that we have voted on this and we have to accept that vote. It doesn't bind us to the salary changes. It's just allowing us to say that we're going to take it up later, which I'm sure we will, and we can have this debate again when we have the salary resolution. But I would urge my colleagues, I know we're going to have more discussion on the budget, but that we not delay the budget any further, and if people feel that they need to take a principled stand to vote against it, they'll certainly have that opportunity when it comes up for another vote. So with that, I know Mr. Simon had more issues that you wanted to bring up, or not?
I do, but I also want to respond on this issue just a little bit, which is there's one very big difference from everyone up here on the governing body and everyone else on the staff. We had the control, and we represented that this was how we were going to do it. So it's late after the election where we are securely in office to point out that, we made a mistake. There were plenty of opportunities to prevent that mistake at any point in the process, and it would never have resulted in this issue if we had done so. The problem is that at this point we have made representations to the public, and we have, frankly, set relative expectations of the staff. And I think both of those I'll just simply say both of those are very important to me personally, and in terms of personalizing the issue, one of the comments I got back from one of our colleagues is that you weren't backing me on this. And that's not a fair request. You're asking me to back an individual on this governing body over the promises I made to the constituents and the representations we've made to the staff.
I'd like to simply point out once again that we are not debating salaries tonight, and that when we have a salary resolution put before us, I'm willing to engage in a discussion of what is the appropriate salary for members of the council and the mayor, or for anyone else. But tonight we are dealing with a budget, not with a salary resolution. And I think that we've been presented with a budget. It's been vetted. It's been discussed. It's a budget with no municipal property tax increase. And I'm in favor of adopting the budget as presented. And I'm quite willing to debate compensation when we're presented with a salary resolution.
And I would also encourage my colleagues to, call in just a second, that we have a $59 million budget plus change, and we spent 45 minutes on a $19,000 line item, and I just want to make sure that I know this is a politically loaded issue, but that we don't want to miss the forest for the trees, and that we do want to have part of this conversation be, and I know we've talked about it at previous meetings too, but I think that we want to have the length of our conversation in some ways match the amount of money we're talking about as well. But Ms. Kremler?
Right, I just wanted to suggest that when we do have this debate, we're not going to have it tonight, we should have the other towns, I believe that you can get a list of all of the salaries of all of the towns in the New Jersey League of Municipalities, and I would like to see that. I don't want to see a pick and choose.
Yeah, we've had that, it goes back a few years, but I'm sure it's been updated.
Right, I know that you can get it,
for.
and I think it would be useful for us all to see that and maybe use it in our debate.
That's fine.
The reason we spend so much time on this issue is because symbolically it is quite outsized. I mean, you can call it political if you want, but it's the only line item in the budget that has to do with our personal gain. And so I actually fundamentally disagree with the point that just because it's a small dollar amount, we shouldn't spend time on it.
I'm not saying we shouldn't spend time on it. I'm just saying that we've spent a significant amount of time on it tonight, and there might be other things in the budget that are also of importance that we might want to talk about.
And there are, and I don't sense any movement from my colleagues on this issue, so in terms of wanting to delay the budget. So moving on. In the 6-year capital plan, I had asked when it was presented about the Mary Moss spray park and also about both of these under the rec department and also about the Valley Road School study or funding that was there. This is I'm just going to read verbatim the email I got back from CFO Sandra Webb. In terms of Mary Moss Park, we are set to receive a grant from the county of approximately $767,000, and the municipal match is $383,000 for a total of $1.15 million. In the capital plan, we have $1.35 million. There is $200,000 too much in the capital plan. We can reduce the capital budget and take the funding from either 2014 or 2015. For Valley Road School, this was just seed money in the event that Valley Road School is demolished, and we want to do a feasibility study on a community center. This project is budgeted for 2015 for $350,000. This is not a top priority for recreation. My suggestion is that we remove both of these from the 6-year capital plan. And with respect to that suggestion, mindful of our inability to make substantive changes to the budget, I guess I ask whether the capital plan falls into that. It does not?
No, the capital does not fall into that. But again, this is just a planning document. Again, in the future, you'll have a bond ordinance back before you, which will lay out the specifics of each of the projects. So you can leave this in, or you can remove it. It does not have any impact on what you'll see down the road in terms of a bond ordinance.
I'm not proposing taking out Mary Moss. I'm proposing reducing it by $200,000 to the level that was intended, and that was represented last year.
That's fine.
Didn't we, in an email exchange, come to the realization that perhaps that was an accounting error, that there was
Right. We responded on an email on that a couple of weeks ago.
Right, so
There's 200 too much in there.
Right, and that is just a mistake. I mean, it's...
Oh, is it already out? Is it already out?
No.
Well-
It's currently in the plan, but it doesn't need to be. That's the point. It was in there by clerical error.
Yeah, I believe that the amount was in there in error.
And we have $350,000 for seed money for a study for a community center for Valley Road School, which, as far as I know, was not a priority from anyone on council. And I'm certainly, if I'm misunderstanding that, please speak up. And I would propose, especially having seen the list of denied projects, I would propose taking that out of the capital plan as well.
Where did you see the denied projects?
That recommendation, I think, Patrick, came...
Pardon me?
I'm sorry, that recommendation, it was not recommended by the rec board for the Valley Road project. That was not one of their priorities.
So I'm still a little fuzzy as where it came from, but I'm recommending that unless somebody on council wishes to advocate on behalf of it, that we pull it out of the capital plan.
No, I don't think there's anybody who's going to advocate. I mean, I'm the rec liaison, I'm not going to advocate on behalf of it. I think, as part of a whole bigger package, but, some of the other things they did and would have advocated for got pulled out, and so maybe because the other bigger things got pulled out, this was left in as sort of a...
Well, if you remember when we modified the grant request from the county, we had said that there were 3 projects we might use the money on.
Right, but that's not this, Bob. I don't think this 345 is not, that's not what that is.
I think that was the impetus for leaving the money in, because we had the Valley Road School project on there, and we have to have a match for that. So if I recall, and I'm trying to go back and recall my thinking on why we left that in, but we have to provide a match to the county. Now, the chances,
Well, we already have,
This is for the wrestling space?
Yes.
I think
don't we already have the match in the first, whatever the numbers were?
That's right. The match, I mean, unless there's a
match is already in the-
second match that I'm not aware of, the match is on the Mary Moss Sprayground, and it's already covered in the 1.15 million.
Right.
Which is now at 1.35. There's 200,000 extra there, and there's 350,000 in another line item, which I don't believe has been prioritized to the top by any member of the governing body.
No.
So I'm proposing that those two line items be struck from the capital
But-
plan.
and I don't think, from a staff perspective, I don't think we have any issues with that. I'm not arguing that point. I'm just trying to recall, talking out loud, how that money got in there and why it was in there. And I believe, and that may be just, when we did the capital budget at that point, that may just have been a misinterpretation by myself in looking at that we wanted to make sure we had that as an option. But the reality is, we are probably not going to have any money left over between Mary Moss and looking at CP to put money into a project that is, a whim anyway. So I would not give it a lot of consideration.
Yeah, you know what, I think that's what, you might have looked at that figure and thought that it was an amount for the Valley Road, the possibility, but I don't think so. I think this is a distinct, separate project.
Okay.
So if it's not in any way threatening the budget process for this year, I would like to move that just to be precise, we take $200,000 out of the 2015 budget for Mary Moss.
Right.
And strike the line for $350,000 from the Valley Road School for rec. If, and if there's a concern on council, please.
Well, should we make an amendment to change it, or when we adopt it, should we adopt it with Patrick's amendments?
We can,
We'll adjust it on the document, that once you approve this and send it down, the plan that goes down will be adjusted, as you just said, but the real authorization comes through the ordinance, so it will be not included in an ordinance that you'll get, all right?
Okay, and that all makes sense. And of course, there's probably some balancing you have to do in other parts of the capital plan, which I presume I'm just going to move that you do that so everything totals out properly.
Yes.
All right. And then, so the next question I had on the budget was on the denied projects, which we see for the first time. This is the first time I've seen this list. It's on page 7 of the budget adoption resolution we have today. 14-140, page 7. Items requested by departments and denied, moved by administration.
Oh, yes.
This is the first time I've seen this list, and it's all capital. There's no operating in here. At least, actually, let me start with that. Is that correct? Is it all capital? Okay. So my question with respect to this is, this list is, what's the process to go over these denied projects? Are we recommending specifically a council meeting to go over these? Are we delegating this to CFAC or to the individual departments to go over these? And I'll just put on the record that I'm uncomfortable with some of the delays or pushed items. One of them is the line item for Bank Street, because Mr. Kaiser said that is his next priority if money becomes available, so pushing it out 6 years seems imprudent. One is the Community Park South rehab, which I realize is quite a large dollar amount, and I don't know if that could be possibly reduced, but I thought I understood from Councilman Butler and also Mr. Stentz that was in fact one of the priorities of the Recreation Department. And I also, having discussed the Public Works facilities and the situation with the Public Works Department and some of the logistics issues they're dealing with, pushing the not the cold storage, the future development of the River Road site out beyond 6 years is also a concern. So now, having said that, I recognize that that's a lot of dollars in our capital plan that we need to so I'm simply putting on the record a concern that we review these and also asking what is the process to do the review.
Well, here's my recommendation for the overall process, is that at the next CFAC meeting, that there be a discussion about, like a little bit of a postmortem, assuming we pass the budget tonight, about the process for next time around. And I think as part of that, it's when do we have this discussion, and I mean, I think that this is important enough where we want to have a work session for council to do, we're going to have to do the 6-year capital project every year. And so,
So I guess that's actually part of my question is, do we want the council discussion of priorities on the capital first, given what's in our plan plus what is not in our plan, or do we want CFAC to take a first crack at it? It almost feels to me like CFAC's already taken a crack at this year's, given the administration's presentation. So the next round should start with a council review of our current plan and the items that are off.
yeah, but CFAC, their review is more of the total number, and I think council is looking within the framework of how much, you know, if we want to keep taxes flat, or if we only want to raise them a modest amount, how much can we spend, right? And I think the priorities of, do we spend the money for this project versus that project, we've never asked CFAC to do that. That's for the council to decide.
Right, and I'm not asking CFAC to do that.
And so, but I think the process, I think we should talk at CFAC to outline the whole thing as to what time of year this makes sense. I know that Mr. Kaiser's mentioned that it's actually be helpful to move up the capital budget to December if we can get better rates in January. But let's look at the whole process, let's look at the whole calendar, and to see if we want to make any changes to that. But I think part of, Bob's looking at me like, what are you doing? But I think it's worth reviewing the calendar again for 2015 to try to improve upon what we've learned this year, so that each year we're...
I agree with that, but I think Patrick is pushing in a direction that maybe you want to consider going, and that is, you need to come up with what your priorities are for these projects. And if you think we should be doing that in 2015, or Bank Street should be next year, or the community park needs to be in 3 years, just pick the year you want to put it. Send it to CFAC and say, okay, so what is this going to mean? I mean, Patrick did a good, quick exercise at the last meeting. If we wanted to say we were going to fund, can't remember how many millions of dollars worth of projects, the impact is not significant on your budget, but it is a little bit in conflict with where you were trying to go, and that's, you know, we're trying to do a little bit of both things. But
Excuse me, it was a lot of it, I think.
yeah. So anyway, what you should be doing is saying, okay, here are our priorities. Here's the year we'd love to be able to do it. Now tell us what that's going to cost. And then you can begin to run different scenarios and fine-tune where your priorities are based upon how much money you think, one, you can support your budget, and two, that you can, sell to the public.
Well, and in addition to that, in addition to our priorities on what I will call big-ticket items that are certainly voluntary to some extent, the other ingredient that we need is we need more clarity from the staff, and certainly engineering with roads is a classic example of what would be the good rules of thumb to follow under normal circumstances, and we have to then decide, well, are we juggling a little bit, or are we trying to follow those? Right, so but we can't make that decision. We don't even know if we're making that decision right now. What we've got from CFAC so far is, here's the decision to follow if we want to keep the level at roughly the same cost. So, but I think this is teeing up a discussion for a later date, so.
Right. But I do think it's a discussion that needs to happen at council, because it is a priority. I would say more than CFAC. I think it's the governing body that has to make the decision about what the priorities are.
Definitely, I think we're all in agreement. I think it's more just a question of what the calendar is.
I would agree with what Ms. Butler just said. I mean, we can't refer priorities to CFAC. CFAC can tell us what the impact is.
Right, but
I think as was discussed last time, even using very broad measures, we're falling behind on maintenance of our infrastructure, the roads. And I think we need to take a hard look at that, and we need some guidance from Mr. Kaiser, from the engineering department, on what we ought to be doing in terms of keeping up with road maintenance.
Well, we could have this discussion, though. We don't need to go by a calendar. I mean, we could have this discussion at our next meeting, the capital, and talking about priorities. I don't know that we need to even rely on CFAC for a calendar. We can set the priorities anytime, and frankly, summer might be a nice time to do it because there's not so much on the agenda.
Well, I just want to question one thing that Bernie just said, that we are falling behind. I don't know that we've have evidence that we're falling behind on our road projects. Are we?
The reaction to that, in terms of why I've landed where Council President Miller has on that question is Mr. Kaiser said that the township the year before consolidation spent $2 million less than prior year standards on road.
I understand.
And 2013 we did the same thing, and this year I'm a little unclear whether we're underspending or not, honestly, because we have a number of largish projects. I thought I heard that we were underspending, but when I actually try to add up all the projects, I'm not entirely sure that I'm convinced of that. But I would, again, defer to staff on that assessment.
Well, I think either we were underspending as two separate, we were overspending as two separate municipalities, spending as a combined municipality, one of the two. We ought to figure out what it is.
Well, yes, and I do think that the evidence is not in, but we're also spending the additional nearly $1 million on, emergency road repair, albeit not planned. But I think we also have to factor in the amount of money that the university is spending on the Alexander Road repairs. So it's not as if the community has not been, we haven't had a level of investment and spending in the road repair. And frankly, unless we're doing some very minor side roads, there's sort of a limit to our traffic issue. We're doing 206, we're going to be doing Mount Lucas. We've got Mercer Road going. People are beside themselves with the diversions. So, I think clearly we could do Bank Street, it's not that heavily traveled, but.
Right, I think it's on our list of what we want to, it's a plan for the roads and understanding how the decisions are made. I don't think it's ever been made just by dollar amounts. Can you say, Bob, right off the top of your head that we're falling behind? Would you say that?
Yes, if you take a look at what the borough traditionally spent and what the former township traditionally spent, we should be around $8 million, and we're at about $5 million. So we're about $3 million behind, and that's fine because, it's a lot of time and effort going through consolidation and so forth, but unless we get that dollar amount back up there again, we are going to be falling behind. And with the winter that we had, you can see the condition of many of the roads, and we are addressing some of the worst ones. But as time goes on, we see other roads that are deteriorating as well. So we really need to focus in on these roads to keep those roads up to a suitable standard.
But what you just said was different from that we are falling behind. You're saying if we don't take measures next year, we will fall behind. Right now, would you say that we are behind?
Yes.
Maybe this will help to say that I would put this on an agenda at some point when hopefully we don't have too much other stuff. I thought this was going to be a light meeting, but to have a discussion, looking through this list, looking through our 6-year plan, and we can have that discussion.
Perfect. That's what I was going to ask, because I thought we had adopted a policy and that we did anticipate, based on CFAC recommendations, reviewing these. We weren't going to depend on CFAC to prioritize for us, but they had made recommendations about process, and I thought it was going to be that we were going to review them in the fall every year so that we were ready going into the budget. Right?
Exactly.
So I don't think we should wait till the next fall, but I think that's the right move.
Okay, I have 2 other topics on the budget. The first is just to essentially apologize that we're not quite where we should be in terms of assessing the savings for consolidation. I would have preferred that we had that available for people as part of making the budget decisions, and simply between staff and CFAC, we have not been able to come to a firm conclusion. Initial numbers suggest that we're in pretty good shape in terms of improving on savings versus last year, but they are not at all final, and they are potentially subject to change. So, and then the last question is just, I guess for my peace of mind, just to confirm, how many votes do we actually need to pass a budget? Is it simple majority, or do we need a 2/3 vote to pass a budget in the borough form of government?
It's majority of the full membership.
Okay, thank you.
And I can vote on the budget? Okay. Are there any other questions? All right, if not, I'd like to, we have two public hearings. I just want to formally open the first one, which is on the 2014 municipal operating budget amendment, as amended. All right, seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing, and then I'll open the public hearing on the 2014 capital budget.
Kip Cherry, 24 Dempsey. I'd like to make a suggestion, a recommendation, going back to the firehouses, and this relates to Valleywood School too, and that is that you've got $280,000 for a feasibility study for the firehouse expansion. And in discussing this before, I asked Bob Boucher about it, and he said that included money for concept design, well beyond feasibility study. And it seems to me that you haven't decided, the public hasn't decided either, where you're going and whether you want to expand the firehouse, if you do, how you want to do it, or whether this other firehouse that I still believe is out there that the university, I believe, wants at some point in the near term, whether that would be an alternative place for expansion of the activities that you want to expand. So therefore, it seems to me that this item could be cut back to an item that would be appropriate for doing a feasibility study, and the capital amount that's in here would just be eliminated until you decided that, in fact, you want to proceed with the project. So that would be my suggestion, and I also have a couple of questions regarding the pilot contributions and whether that's in the capital plan. I suspect that those contributions are not listed, so the public doesn't know from the capital plan what the real cost is, or what you think the cost might be. So maybe you can answer that question at this late time.
Well, the estimates that we used for, say, the firehouse was an estimate that we had prepared, I guess, about 2.5, 3 years ago. And so, the number that I put in, it reflects 10% of that, which is a standard cost for soft cost for design and so forth. We're pricing out right now what we think a study will be to determine spatial needs, not from a design standpoint,
right,
but from just what do we need? Do we need another bay? Do we need 5 trucks? Do we need 4 trucks? Because that'll determine, do we need another bay? Do we need 3
right,
bays? We don't. That's not reality. But so we're looking for proposals now to get that work done, because that'll kind of set the frame.
How much have you anticipated that might be?
Not a significant amount, probably $35,000 at the most. We're not looking at an in-depth firehouse study. We have a previous report that was done back in, I think, 2007 or 8, something like that. Right. But we need to take that to where we are now and see what's changed, and then look at equipment needs.
Well, could I recommend then that the amount in there be the amount that's required for the feasibility study? And then, as you pointed out, you revise your capital plan every year, and at that point, next year, we will know not only, what the consultant recommends and not only what you all think, but the public will have had an opportunity to have reviewed the feasibility study, and we will have some idea of where we're going. So it just seems to me that the budget is inflated for something that isn't really real at this point. And before you react to that, I just wanted to ask also, you've got items, repair items for 3 firehouses in here, and I just wondered whether maybe a little more information about that. 2 of them are $90,000, which is quite a bit, and one of them is at around 180, just around numbers. If we're going to possibly sell 2 firehouses down the road, why are we fixing them up? I'm sure you have a good reason, but I just think that the public deserves to know the whole situation, and obviously there's been no decision made about selling, or they might be reusing. You might even use one of them as a firehouse again. So I know you don't want the roof to leak and such. You want to be able to maintain them until you decide what you want to do. But I just thought that the public deserves to understand better this amount of money, which is considerable.
And then, again, I recommend then that you go back to just putting in enough for the feasibility study, which, what did you just say was the amount you thought estimated?
I can't imagine it would be more than, $35,000.
$35,000. So that would be my suggestion, that you go with that number. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bob, to follow up on that, when would we expect, how would the timing of that work again if we contract for a report? How long would that take?
Well, I would hope that the report can be concluded by the end of the summer on our equipment needs and that. It's not an in-depth report. And at that point, we could look and say, we could evaluate the report, and my hope would be that we'd be able to engage someone to do some preliminary planning on the facility and the potential, whether it's here or somewhere else. Maybe it'll end up being somewhere else, but to not delay that process. I mean, that's a project that kind of got stalled for the past 3 years, and I do think we're going to get some pushback if we just, kind of don't try to move forward on it and at least show some commitment to it. You may never spend that money, and you may never authorize it, which is fine. I mean, it kind of falls on the same, path of some of the projects that we talked about earlier. But I do think you should allow yourselves that. I think it just sends a message that you're committed to reviewing the project with the fire department, because they've been very patient waiting for this. They think there's a real need. I think you're going to find that there's a need. But we don't know what that need is, and that's really what you guys have to feel comfortable with.
The Kramer report, I think, was more like 2011, just by the by. But do we have an RFP out for this work?
No. At this juncture, we don't. Bob Gregory's working on an RFP, but we don't have one out on the street. I don't think it's going to be that significant a process to put it together and put it out. There are only a handful of people that could do it. And you may be right, Joe. I thought it was like 2008 or 9, but it could be. I know Mark Frieda was our director at the time that we did it, but a lot's changed with the fire department in that time period. They've merged all into one building. That wasn't the case back then. We had real manpower issues, and they were looking at consolidating from 3 firehouses to 2. I think Kip mentioned that last meeting. Instead, they opted to go to 1 single firehouse for a fire response because that ended up working. So we need to evaluate what that means to us. It certainly, from a firefighting standpoint, has worked out real well, but what does it mean from a facility standpoint? So.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks, Bob. I mean, I agree. I think I understand what you're saying about how you wish, it would be nice to know exactly what the money is for, but I'm pretty convinced that we are going to need to spend a significant amount to improve the firehouse. That's not saying anything else about the building or what it would look like, but I do feel that it's important for us to keep that commitment.
I agree 100% that we should leave that amount in the line item. And I do think that the fire department has been very, very patient, as Bob mentioned. And this is the first time that we are putting our money where our mouths are. And I think it's important for us to move forward. And Kip, I hate to say trust us, because that's the last thing a politician need to tell you, but you need to try to trust us. And we're not going to spend $280,000 if it's not needed.
Well, I realize, but I'm just saying that the
too.
capital budget should have some basis in fact, and I'm not saying don't do a study. I'm just saying that you already have decided what study it is you're going to proceed with. Put that number in the budget, and then, once we know what the results of the study are. And the Kramer report did provide, in 10 years' time, a plan or a proposal to have another firehouse. That's in the Kramer report on page 102 or something, I forget. So, Mr. Kramer went through all that at the time. There was a substantial public presentation that he gave to Borough Council on this subject. So, And, you know, I really think that it would help a lot for you all to ask the university a little bit more, too, about what their plans are, or their hopes or dreams or whatever. I mean, there is a fire engine sitting down there at the university right now. It's in a building, it's behind a closed door, and it's there 24/7. So, you know, I think there's more to understand about all this. But I do think you need a feasibility study. There's no question about it. The thing is, if you're planning to spend 35, why not just put that in your budget and don't inflate it with other things?
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments from the public? Okay, I'm going to close the second public hearing and bring it back to council and to see if there's any other comments. If not, I'd ask for a motion to approve the resolution adoption of the 2014 municipal operating and capital budget with the two amendments recommended by Mr. Simon to the 6-year plan. One was to reduce the amount for the Mary Moss Playground, and the other was to remove the Valley Road School
$350,000 allocation. Both of those are in 2015. Right.
Okay.
And this is just the capital plan that we're talking about on the vote right now, right?
Well, the resolution is for both.
This is what I'm asking. Are we voting to, what are we voting on right now?
We're voting on the resolution with the, as with the two amendments that you're proposing.
The entire budget resolution?
Correct.
Including the one that has the money allocated?
Yes, that's what we went through that already.
I was afraid of that. All right.
So I'm asking if there's still further discussion, I'm happy to entertain that, or if there's a motion.
There is a motion. I make the motion that we accept the municipal operating and capital budget with the amendments that were named.
Moved by Mr. Liverman and seconded by Mr. Miller. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Can you do a roll call, please?
It's a roll call vote. Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Ms. Cramiller?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
No.
Mr. Simon?
No.
Okay, the resolution passes 4-2. So thank you. Thank you, Ms. Webb. And just want to make sure that I'm in the right spot here. Okay, we've done most of the agenda, but we have a few resolutions left to do. Okay, so the first is 14-141, Establishment of IT Governance Council, and I just want to refer everybody on council to the revised version of this that you have at your spot. And this incorporates the language changes recommended by Mr. Simon, which just make this a little more specific, and the addition of Joseph Maroli from the Rec Department as recommended by Ms. Butler.
And before it's introduced, I'd like to make one other suggestion, which is to put in parentheses next to Kathy Monzo's name, chairperson.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Mayor, could I just got an email, which you did too, from Henry Singer, and he was unable to be here tonight for this. He did express that he has some concerns that there's no citizens on the council. However, he did suggest that next to everyone's name, we put their title and department they're from to make it clearer for the public. So I would like to do that as an amendment to this, is add their names and titles to all of those.
Yes, that'd be great.
I have no objection to that.
And part of this list is to make sure that we have good representation from all the departments that seem to use technology the most. But so is there a motion to approve this with those changes?
I actually have a question. What did you recommend? What were your changes? Because this is the first I've seen this.
Sure, let me run through those. Give me just a second to pull up the email I sent.
It's essentially in the now, therefore be it resolved clause.
Right, so that's the primary change, is that the second, be it further resolved, was the only resolution before. We were creating an IT governance council without specifying anything about what it did. So the first resolution paragraph is new, and it's taken from the whereas section up above, which expressed intent, but the previous version of the resolution did not enact the intent.
Right, so that was actually okay, so whereas that IT governance were in the whereas clause, do you want to, I noticed you changed the name of the committee, which I think is a good.
I did that, so that's another thing. I felt the term IT governance council
right.
Would cause potential confusion in the borough form of government where we have a council, and also implies a level of independence, which I don't think we were necessarily implying. This is an advisory body, and so I explicitly added language in the first resolution paragraph that it's subject to the approval of the municipal administrator and subject to municipal council approval where required by New Jersey state statute or principal municipal ordinance. All right, so so in terms of the first resolution paragraph, there's one, generally what the steering committee will do, and two, pointing out that this is in no way taking away anything from the administrator or anything from the council in terms of power. This is advisory, but just think of it as, in short, the purpose is think of IT as needing to work with their internal customers to be able to have a steering committee guiding them.
Right, but so I went back and read the report from, the IT recommendation. It is more than advisory. It's not a council committee that we're creating. It really is kind of based on the recommendation from the consultant, it really is an internal staff committee. I mean, if we're going by what the recommendation here is, I mean, we would have to approve any money that they spend, but it looks to me like they have the authority to make a lot of decisions.
And essentially, all I've done to change that is say subject to the approval of the administrator. So if the administrator delegates that authority to them, they have it. If the administrator chooses not to, then they have to advise the administrator, and he or she has to make the final decision. That's how I've proposed it. If people are not happy with that, we can certainly change it, but I felt that it was important to spell out the relationship to the administrator and to the council,
right,
which was not, in the prior wording of the resolution.
Right.
I think that may be all of the changes. I'm looking to see if I made any others.
But this committee essentially reports to the administrator. It's not advisory to us, even though somebody from council sits on it. It's different than other. It's almost odd in my mind that we have a resolution on it, but.
Well, I think part of this was the report. I think the report was well received, but it was a pretty big report to have council digest, and so. Part of that sort of prefaced it, it's just late, so and my mind's not fully here, but part of this was to go forward with this recommendation, create the steering committee, and have one of the first tasks of the steering committee be to go back through the report and go through the priorities that were identified by the consultant who, I mean, she talked to a lot of people, but she's still an outside consultant, and to have this group really review them again, are those really the right priorities for year 1, year 2, year 3, and then bring it back to council.
Right. So here's the full inventory of changes. The first draft created the governance council without specifying its powers, so I added the resolution clause to try to do that. It created a governance council without specifying how it relates to administrative and municipal council. We already talked about that point. We talked about changing the name of it, and it also used the phrase in the last one, the municipality has agreed that IT governance is essential. And essentially that's technically inaccurate since we didn't formally accept the strategic IT plan, so I phrased it, mayor and council agree that IT governance consistent with the recently completed strategic IT plan is essential. I phrased the last whereas clause to assert what we were asserting in this resolution, as opposed to asserting that we had asserted anything in the past about the plan.
Okay.
I think personally, I think your changes were all excellent ones. And would you like to move this?
I do. I would like to move.
Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Simon, seconded by Ms. Butler. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. The next resolution is 14-142, NJDOT lane use restriction for Route 206.
So moved.
Left turn lanes.
I'll second.
We've been working with the Department of Transportation regarding the striping in 206, and they found out that much of the striping that was already in place had not been approved by the commissioner. So, working with them, they've asked that this resolution be passed that would enable much of that striping to be put back in, and also make a couple minor adjustments that we were looking for.
Okay, thank you. It was moved by Mr. Simon and seconded by Ms. Carmeller. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Final resolution, 14-143, appointing an insurance fund commissioner and a alternate insurance fund commissioner to serve on the Mid-Jersey Municipal Joint Insurance Fund. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Krummeller, seconded by Mr. Miller. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And I think that we should have a quick closed session because there might be some items here that need our immediate attention. So is there a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Krummeller, seconded by Mr. Liverman. All in favor?
Aye.